If there's one animated movie that I was anticipating the most this year, it would be The Colors Within. Directed by the incredible Naoko Yamada, it further shows me just how talented and ahead of the game Yamada is as an anime director. She's mostly known for her works at Kyoto Animation. For those who don't know, she directed the film adaptation of A Silent Voice. She worked on K-On!, Sound Euphonium, and the wonderfully crafted Liz and the Bluebird, but recently she has departed from the studio and has now worked with Science Saru instead. I say all of this because if you told me that this was still produced by Kyoto Animation, I would have believed you. This is an incredibly stunning film. Naoko Yamada is by all means an auteur. She has a distinctively unique style of direction, and watching The Colors Within, I could not help but be reminded of Liz and the Bluebird, of A Silent Voice, and how there aren't any other anime films like it. And I'm talking about the choice of direction, certain shot angles, the emphasis on specific character gestures and motions, camera movements. There are so many stylistic choices that are just inherently Naoko Yamada's. It's like when you're watching a Tarantino movie and there's a feet shot and you're like, there it is. It's kind of the same with Yamada's filmography when there's a leg shot, for example. Except here it's not really a fetish, and it's more so to drive home the personality and the expression of the characters, which are done incredibly well, by the way. I wasn't trying to be weird or anything. But anyways, this is all to say that this is one of the best directed anime movies that I've seen all year. There's this soft tenderness and care being put on display that, while watching it, I couldn't help but feel warm and cozy inside. If I was watching this at home and not in a theater, I would absolutely get my blanket and relax while the film brisked me away in its dazzlingly sweet and colorful atmosphere. Yeah, this is absolutely a comfort movie. It's all about the vibes, which honestly is pretty refreshing. I'm sure if you have seen A Silent Voice, for example, you know how that film could be a destroyer of emotions. I mean, I was certainly tearing up a lot when I was watching it, and the same can be said about Liz and the Bluebird to a degree. These are films dealing with certain subject matters that are, I would say, more brutally realistic than one might have expected. And while The Colors Within also talks about certain subject matters that I'm sure some of you will resonate with, I certainly did, but it's not at all trying to be a sad movie. No, this is probably one of the sweetest ground-to-earth animated films of the year. There are conflicts, of course, but nothing major that will make your heart beat in anxiety and worry, and that's completely fine. It's a story primarily about a growing group of friends who are bound by their shared passion of creating music, and it's all about choosing your own path in life. It's a story about chasing dreams, becoming your own person, finding ways to express yourself while also figuring out how to balance it all with your current life. Sometimes to achieve something you have to sacrifice something else. Sometimes that means going against what was previously laid out for you. And this all sounds familiar to a lot of other stories, but The Colors Within takes itself seriously, and it never really tries to romanticize its plot, if you understand what I'm saying. It's not trying to be over dramatic. There are no theatrics here. There was never a point where a scene felt like it was directed to purposefully make me cry, if you know what I mean. And yet there are moments in the film where I did cry. There's a scene where our characters are just sitting next to each other at night, opening up about themselves. No background music at all, by the way. And as the scene goes on, I'm like, why am I getting teary-eyed? Because it's not a sad scene by any means, but it felt real. And that hits. And speaking of music, the soundtrack for the film is excellent in how minimalistic it is. Kensuke Ushio did the score for this. He did the soundtrack for a lot of Yamada's work, including A Silent Voice and Listen to Bluebird. And the soundtrack for The Colors Within is in that same minimalistic style that he used on those other films, which is to say that the soundtrack feels more like atmospheric sounds, and I'm saying that as a compliment. There are many instances where there is no background music at all, which not only adds to the realism and the overall immersion of the film, but the subtle score that Kensuke Ushio chose for this makes the singing performances of our characters stand out a lot more. It honestly truly felt like a release when they started to sing, even just from their early practices, for example, because you feel how much these characters want to express their emotions. It's like when you're slowly building up the courage to say something and then you finally say it, and any fear and doubts you had before are just washed away instantly because just letting it out feels that good. That's how I felt when they showed that final performance. It's like a weight has been lifted, and seeing these characters just reaching out for their dreams of creating music and just the overall tone and vibe of that scene felt cathartic to me. Again, I wasn't expecting to cry during this moment, but I did. These are literal tears of joy, and I guess it also showed me how much I actually cared about these characters. Like I mentioned earlier, this isn't a story with any high stakes per se. It's not trying to be a drama. In fact, there isn't much drama, and I was worried if this direction won't work for me, but the fact that I was so engaged with these characters by the end is proof that I was engaged. In stories like this, I find that I'm able to engage with it more with the mindset that it is less about who these characters are and more about what these characters represent. I say this because of the three main characters. I felt that Rui, the male character, is the least focused of the trio, at least in comparison to the relationship between the two other characters, Totsuko and Kimi. And generally speaking, for all three characters, on the surface it is pretty simple and straightforward, which I can totally see some people not liking this aspect, but it's why I said this is a story that's focused more on exploring its themes and delivering its message, and less to do with being a character study. And I'm also not saying that these characters are shallow either. Remember, I said on the surface, it feels simple and straightforward, and this is where the film's overall subtleties come into play. You get an understanding of the characters a lot more from their interactions with other characters, but also from the film's main setting and visual motifs. How our characters feel being in a Catholic school, how each different color represents our characters, how certain shots have our characters boxed up or framed, for example. There are a lot of these little moments throughout the movie that really highlights how much trust the filmmakers are putting towards the audience. It's why the film doesn't directly talk about these issues, and yet they are made to be visually clear for us. It's why certain conflicts felt like they're not being explored enough, because it expects us to feel and understand exactly what our characters are feeling, and that these conflicts shouldn't have been conflicts to begin with. Why should we feel sorry for ourselves for chasing our dreams? Why do we have to hide our true emotions? The film boldly decided to make what could have been conflicts into something so trivial because it dares to challenge itself like our main characters. Why should we feel worried about something that shouldn't be worrying to begin with? The film's lack of any high-stake conflict, I think, worked in its favor of trying to spread its pure and positive message of understanding one another and showing acceptance. When I said earlier that this is one of the sweetest films I've seen all year, I meant it. I don't really need another movie to show me how terrible life can be before giving me a hopeful ending to make it feel somewhat rewarding. Life's already terrible, am I right, guys? So watching an almost 2-hour film that's just basically reminding me of how colorful life can be through the eyes of one of our characters who sees color differently from us feels nice. This movie's nice. It's just good vibes. It's nice. It's like looking at a sunrise on a beach. That's all it is. There's not much else going on, but that's kind of the point. It's nice to look at, and by the end you feel like you're positively recharged. And those were my quick thoughts on The Colors Within. Let me know what you think if you have seen the movie. As of recording, I don't think it hasn't been released in the West yet, so I guess I'll see some of you in 2025 when you do get to see it. But thanks for watching. Please give it a like if you do enjoy the video, and I will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Have a nice day.